immediately fall into the trap and get caught.
What kind of a trap? Is that called as a good trap or a bad trap? Now, see, if you talk about the story, the rat trap, it is nothing but a kind of a symbolism, right? So, producing the kind of a metaphorical thought. Metaphorical thought means direct comparison. Now, what does that rat trap signify here? Like, you know that means how we catch the uh, any of the rat or called as other creature or animals that may be called as sometime you must have seen that the monkeys so what generally happen, we give something, right? We try to put something inside that net and we allow the rat to come inside to eat that, and when they do it, it automatically closes. It automatically closes, and that's become nothing but the danger part of uh, its life, right? So the rat trap symbolizes the same thing. Why does the rat was trapped? Why does the rat trap here? Now, because of its greedy nature, because of its greedy nature, or because of its means because of its temptation of getting the luxuries, or called as a means to get something for satisfying the needs, right? So that is the reason what happened. Now the rat was in a trap, and that trap becomes considering as a dangerous trap, right? So the metaphor of the rat trap signifies that the whole world exists only to trap. The whole world exists for what? Now to trap people, that by setting some kind of a plan for them. Whenever someone is tempted or desired by the luxuries or greedy for the luxuries, so he ends up being caught in a dangerous trap, right? That is what it is stated. So uh, we also consider that means the rat trap is also known as an allegory, Allegory. If you say the how it is an allegory, because the peddler has come to the conclusion, right? The peddler has come to the conclusion that the whole world is like a rat trap, and it had never existed for any other purpose than to set plan for others. So although you find out the kind of a statement the peddler has made is a purely negative, right? Purely negative what? Negative allegory, right? And plays out on the peddler himself when he steals the 30, what is that? 30 kroner, and ends up in the woods. Ends up in the woods means what? He moved here and there, isn't it? Are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that is what. The first one is called as a metaphorical thought. Second one is called as a allegory. So how metaphorical thought? Now to identify the idea about uh, means, how the world is exist with the rat trap is directly compared with the world that presents with uh, a, some kind of a plan to make the people in trap by attracting or desire, putting them into a kind of a desire to uh, go for the kind of a luxuries, and they end up turning, they end up with they end up with their life in danger, right? And that's what happened in the case of the rat trap or the peddler, right? So we also know about means uh, the whole story is indicating about allegory, so which is a symbolism. So that brings the idea about the rat trap's pessimistic thought, right? So where means he did the mistake of stealing the thing, and he was telling the kind of a statement that called as a pessimistic symbolism, right? Even if you talk about the means topic, the rat trap presents with the irony of the lesson of the rat trap. What is that? The iron means what is the irony of the lesson of the rat trap? If you say the iron master is being sarcastic in the case that criticism are called as a mockery in the case, or sarcastic uh, sarcastic uh, ideas, displaying a bit of verbal irony. Verbal irony means what? To say something and to get some different idea, in the sense that he thinks of the vagabond. He thinks of the what? Vagabond. The meaning of vagabond is called as a traveler, right? He thinks of the traveler at this point as quite the opposite of a fine fellow. At this moment, he thinks of him as a nothing more than a tip, right? He thinks of him as a what? Nothing more than a tip, right? So that's what is called as a kind of a irony. Irony means two different ideas that you find out in the story, right? So, uh, what else you can draw here? Um, the irony also considering as a kind of a discordance. Discordance means called as a disagreement. Or you can talk about a native speaker to say something other than a poem's literal meaning, right? So, uh, if you talk about this story, the story presenting with nothing but those of the things. First is metaphor, second is irony, third is allegory, right? Now, coming to the topic in all total sends a kind of a means idea. It begins with the rat trap seller who leads a very poor life, right? So as his earnings are very low, he has to satisfy, right, his basic needs by doing or decided to thievery. Thievery means stealing and begging to make both ends meet. So when we say that both ends meet, it indicates that to sustain his life, to fulfill his means hungry stomach. So we also know that he is alone in this whole world, in the story, and leads a very sad, miserable life. So he starts weaving, or called as a knitting up. So when you talk about knitting up, it means called as a weaving various kinds of thoughts. So like dreaming, right? Various kinds of thoughts. One of these thoughts is of supposing what? One of these thought is of supposing the whole world as a big rat trap. Big rat trap. So it was nothing but his thought. So his views are the world offers us various types of means uh, plan in the form of comforts of life, attracting you, right? And this in return traps the common people, or traps us into the rat trap of the world. And that's why it is considering as a rat trap and leads us to various types of miseries. So, leads us means what? We live a kind of a miserable life. So every time what happened, or every night the peddler had to search for a shelter as he has no home. So one evening what happened, he was offered shelter uh, by an old crafter. So if you talk about the meaning of crafter, crafter is referring as a farmer, right, or a farm. The next morning what he did, the person who gave him the kind of a comfortability or shelter. So he stole from the crofter's house. He stole the crofter's money, which the crofter earned by selling his cow's milk. So, to safeguard himself, what did the peddler do? The peddler closed the path. The peddler, the peddler choose the path. The peddler choose the path through what? Means you can say that through the woods, or here you can talk about woods means forest, right, or jungle. So, which means he did it, and he was nothing but secluded. Secluded means indicating as a lonely, right, isolate. But soon found himself trapped in the forest as he was not able to find the way out of the dense forest. Dense forest means something which is called as a filled with wood, right? Later on, he finds what? He finds a way to a forge, right? And takes a shelter there, right? So what do you mean by forge here? Means if you talk about the forge, you would find out the idea forge indicates about what do you say that? Um, a place which is called as a um, iron player means uh, iron iron house, you can say that, where it has been means it has been constructed, or you can say that they make the shape of the iron, right? That is what it is formed. Now what happened here? So he finds a way to a forge and takes a shelter there, right? But at the same time, he finds out something unusual happens. What was that? Means he took a shelter in that particular iron house. So where there was the iron master, right? The iron master mistakes him as his old friend. And what did the Iron Master do here? The Iron Master invites him to his house. So the poor peddler rejects the offer of the Iron Master. Why? Now, because obviously he did the kind of a misdeed, or stole the, so what do you say that? Stole the kroner from the house. So the poor peddler rejects the offer due to nothing but the fear of being caught. Soon he is invited by the Iron Master's daughter, but this time he could not. The next morning he is somehow stopped by the Iron Master's daughter. Why? Now, because of the Christmas Eve. It was the kind of a event, right? So he was invited by his daughter. Even after being caught that he was a peddler and not Captain Stull, right? It means what? It indicates that he disguised himself, right? He obscured his own identity, means he hid his own originality. So the next day after Christmas, when the Iron Master and his daughter visit the church, right, they came to know that the reality of the man who was a thief, who had stolen their money from the old crafter's house. So the Iron Master and his daughter means realized, repent. So why? Now means they thought that what did they do actually? They means uh, gave the shelter to a thief and wonder at what all things he would have stolen by that time. Here, so here comes a kind of a, you would find out a kind of a changes that instead of stealing, the peddler did what? Now gifts the Iron Master daughter a rat trap, right? So wanted to point out that means what it symbolizes. She finds the Iron Master's daughter finds a letter of thanks and the stolen money inside the rat trap, right? So the peddler thanks Edla for her kindness and requests her to return the stolen money to the crafter, right? So that is what Edla. you find out the daughter of the Iron Master. So this story gives us the kind of a message that goodness is not end. It is there in a human being, and that can be, that can be made awake at any time. Means if you do good or if you have the good deeds, right? That's what it tries to represent. Okay, no issue. Once upon a time, there was a man who, moved around selling small rat traps, right? As small rat traps of wire, right? He made them himself at odd moments from the material he got begging in the stores or at the big farms. Now, if you talk about that, uh, how did he make the rat traps? He made the rat traps of wire and he made them himself at the odd moment, right? Am I visible or am I audible clearly?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So then after it says that from the material he got. So where did he get the material actually? He got the material by begging. Means you could say that uh, he went to the door to door, right? Um, and or you can say that in the stores or at the big farms, right? But even so, the business was not especially profitable. So the kind of a job he does is not profitable, right? So he had to resort to both begging and petty thievery, right? So when you talk about petty thievery, it indicates about some kind of a small illegal activities. So why? Now, by selling the rat traps, right, as well as doing petty thievery to keep his body and soul together. So that's what means you would find out in the initial statement of the topic called the rat trap. So to keep body and soul together means to make himself means sustain or to survive. Even so, his clothes were in rags. Rags means called as a, not in a good condition or called as a shabby. His cheeks were sunken and hunger gleamed in his eyes. Gleamed is indicating about shone, clearly shining. So that's what the author stated. Once there was a man who used to sell small rat traps made of wire, and these rat traps were made by him in his free time. He used to collect the material required by begging from stores or called as a big farms. So begging means called as a means getting something free of cost or with the kindness of big farms or big stores. Still, his business was not earning him any profit, right? Therefore, what did he do? He had to, beg or steal in order to survive, right? His clothes were old and torn. His cheeks were, that's something called as lowered inside due to, you can talk about not having a good food to eat for numerous days. And one could easily see the kind of a hunger in his eyes, right? That's what it is pointed. So in the next part, you would find out no one can imagine, right, how sad and monotonous life can appear to such a vagabond. The meaning of vagabond is called as a traveler or wanderer. So who flirts along the way, who walks means every time all the way, right? So along the road and left to his own meditations. But one day this man had fallen into a line of thought. So when you talk about line of thought, it means called that he got lost, right? Which really seemed to him entertaining, right? Which he found was nothing but a very interesting to him. So he had naturally been thinking of his rat traps when suddenly he was struck by whom? Struck by the idea that the whole world about him, right? So you could see that the idea stated he had naturally been thinking of his rat traps when suddenly he was struck by the idea that means why he was thinking about his rat traps. The whole world was also considered as a rat trap. The whole world with its lands and seas, its cities and villages was nothing but a big rat trap. It had never existed for any other purpose than to set beds for people. Now, when you talk about beds for people, means what? That called as a uh, uh, the place, the world, which is nothing but made for the purpose of what? Now, to satisfy the hunger or to satisfy the need for people. And that's why the rat trap was made. It offered riches and joys, right? Wealth, happiness, shelter, food, heat, and clothing. Exactly as the rat trap offered cheese and pork. Rat trap offered cheese and pork, and as soon as anyone allow himself be desired to touch the bait, bait means called as a food, it closed in on him, and then everything came to an end. Now that's what it is, the idea which is pointed, means how the man was thinking about the rat trap, and suddenly he came to his mind about the whole world, which includes land, sea, villages. So, and all these things were similar to a rat trap. He thought that there was no meaning of the existence of this world. Why there was no meaning of the existence of this world? Now, it was nothing but a desire, temptation. Just like means, cheese and pork. These are the food item which we offer to whom? Which we offer means as food to catch whom? The rat in the midnight. So according to him, as soon as the rat tries to get that cheese and pork, what happened? Means it was caught. So similar to that, the people also sometimes do what? Now try to comfort themselves with joy, food, and shelter, and and at once get trapped into what? No, get trapped into this rat trap, which is known as the world, right? So the author also stated that uh, the world had, of course, never been very kind to him. So it gave him unusual happiness to think ill of it in this way. It became a cherished, or cherished means called as a enjoyed, to love, protect of it. During many dreary floodings, dreary means called as a dull, right, monotonous, or called as a fearful flooding. Flooding means so where he walk heavily. During many dreary plottings, to think of people he knew who had allowed themselves be caught in the dangerous snare, and of others who were still circling around the bait. So you would find out that the author, while discussing about the story, he was introducing the kind of a character. So the character which appearance and which means behavior and his which way of doing, right, was completely different. And while presenting the character, the author is also trying to show the world. The author stated that no one in the world ever been kind to the rat trap seller. So he started thinking ill of others. It became a favorite pastime for him during, dull moments. These thoughts made him happy. So he continued with thinking ill of those who were known to him, right? Ill of those who means who were known to him. So whom he knew, he would imagine those people who were already trapped in the rat trap of worldly things. Worldly things means what? That called as a food, shelter, and warmth, and also those who were about to get trapped into it. So the details stated here clearly about whom, means about the person, the peddler, the rat trapper, and his line of thought. Even the author also discussed about one dark evening, means uh, while he was thinking all the such kind of things, one dark evening as he was trudging. Trudging means what? Moving, walking slowly along the road. He caught sight of a little grey cottage. Now the story begins with the interesting one. He saw a little grey cottage which stood by the roadside, right? And he went up to the cottage and knocked at the door. So, as to get shelter for the night. So, why did he go to that place? Now, he wanted to take the rest. Generally, he was not held by anyone, but this time he was welcomed. So, you would find out that some kindness, benign people were there. So, he was welcomed by the old man into his cottage. So he was a lonely old man without wife and kids. The old man was happy to get company that night. That's why he allowed the man to get into the house. So the old man gave him what? Gave him some porridge. Porridge means called as uh, a sweet rice, sweet water rice to eat, and then shared his tobacco, right, with the guest. After this, both played cards till bedtime. So here you will find out the author stated about means certain words, right? Like you can say trudging. Trudging means walking slowly or moving slowly. So we get the idea, like when the story reintroduced in the story itself, it is stated that how means in the evening time he was moving slowly along the road, right? So you also find out that he caught sight a little grey cottage, right, by the roadside, and he knocked on the door to ask shelter to the night. So he was not refused. Instead of the sore faces means the kind of appearance the rat trapper had, which ordinarily met him. So, and that's the reason people usually not allow him to get into the house, right? But immediately in the case of this particular, he put the porridge pot on the fire and gave him supper. Then he carved off. Now look into the word called as a carved up. The meaning of carved up is called as a divide something into parts. Such a big slice from his tobacco roll that it was enough both for the stranger's pipe. So he carved up means he divided, means a big slice from his tobacco that it was enough both for the stranger's pipe and his own. Finally, he got out an old pack of cards and played Jollis, right? Or Meolis. You can say that Meolis, Mjolis is called as a Meolis, with its guest until bedtime. So Meolis is nothing but a game, means played with playing cards. The author also stated the old man was just as generous or kind-hearted with his confidence as with his porridge and tobacco. The guest was informed at once that in his old age, so now you find out that the rat trapper was where? Now was in the stranger's house, and where you find out both were enjoying the porridge and tobacco. So, and both were into the conversation. The guest was informed at once that in his days of prosperity means happiness, his host had been a crofter at Ramsjo Ironwork, right? Now, when you talk about the crofter means that's something called as a person who works on a rented farm, right? Who works on a rented farm. So the guest was informed at once that in his days of prosperity, means the man in his happy days, right? His host had been a crofter. So his host had been a crofter at the name of the crofter is called as Ramsjo Ironworks, and had worked on the land. Now that he was no longer able to do day labor, it was his cow which supported him, right? So cow supported him. But yes, that Bossy was extraordinary. She could give milk for the you can say, creamery every day. And last month he had received all of 30 kroner in payment. Now, when we talk about this particular means idea, we draw the idea that what means the stranger who allowed means the rat trapper into his home. So while in the conversation, he told certain things, that how he was once rich, and how means people used to means uh, work, right? And also how he was called as a bossy now for the means what uh, for the kind of a farm where he kept the cow. So you also find out the word like a creamery, a factory that produces cheese and cream. And how did he keep such an amount in his house? That's something called as a 30 kroner. Now, you find out that the rat trapper, right, the rat trap seller felt that the old man was not only liberal, liberal means called as broad minded in sharing his porridge, but also he shared the secrets, right? He tells him that he was a rich, and when he used to walk in a rented farm, he was at the same time means he could not work at the moment now, as he was old now and also could not work. So he had to depend upon whom? Now, his cow for his living. The cow gave enough milk every day to be sold in the factory that produced cheese and cream. And the old man said that he was able to earn somehow called it 30 kroners last month because of the cow's milk, right? So the stranger must have appeared incredulous. Incredulous means the stranger did not believe, right? So who was the stranger here? The rat trap seller. So for the old man got up and went to the window. The old man got up and went to the window, took down a leather pouch. It means he was not only broad-minded, he was not only sharing the secret, he was even not hesitate to means show the witness or evidence. Took down a leather pouch which hung on a nail in the very window frame. So wherever he kept that pouch and inside the pouch 30 kroner, so he brought that and showed. So and where that means pouch was hung, it was hung on a nail. It was hung on a nail in the very window frame, and picked out the three wrinkled 10 kroner bills. Wrinkled, wrinkled means called as a not in a means good appearance. You would find out wrinkling skin. So similar to that, it's a paper note, right, which was wrinkled, right? So and these he held up before the eyes of his guest, right, nodding knowingly, and then means stuffed them back into the pouch to fill up with something and put it again. So the next day, both men got up in good season, right? So what do you find out next morning? It was a good day for them. Both the rat trap seller and the crofter woke up early. Why? Now, as the crofter was in a hurry to milk his cow. So crofter means that called as a farmer was in a hurry to milk his cow. Even the rat trap seller felt that the owner of the house had awakened, right? So he should also leave the bed, right? Sometimes what happened, you do not want to leave the bed, but as the other family members had left the bed early, right? So that's why you left the bed. So likewise, you would also find out the rat trap seller also felt that the owner of the house had awakened. So he had to also, or he thought that it better for him to leave the bed. So they both came out of the, cottage at the same time. So the old man locked the door and went to his work. So means the rat trap or seller also was taking a night stay there. But as the day came out and he left the place, the rat trap seller also thanked the crofter and went his own way, right? But half an hour later, what happened? So after about half an hour, the rat trap seller returned to the cottage. Why? And he broke down the window pane because he knew that where the money was kept. So he took away the money and kept it in his pocket, but the pouch back at its place and walked up. Right. So what did he do? Now he took out the money from that pouch and put the pouch back at its place and quickly left the place. As he walked along with the money in his pocket, he felt what? Now quite happy, quite pleased with its smartness. What did he do? Now he cheated to the person. He thieved the money, he stole the money, right? So he realized, of course, that at first he did not continue on the public highway. Like he knew that he stole the money, so that's why it's better for him not to go on the public highway, but must turn off the road, right, into the woods. So he decided to go into the woods. During the first hour, this caused him no difficulty. Later in the day, it became worse, right? Why? Now, because it was a big and confusing forest which he had gotten into. So, the kind of a place we went into, he tried to be sure to walk in a definite direction. So, he thought that he would go into the means a particular direction, but the path twisted back and forth. So, or in after some time, it became strange for him. He walked and walked without coming to the end of the wood. So he found out that the wood or the jungle was very big and he could not find out the way. And finally, he realized that he had only been walking around in the same part of the forest, right? Because it made him a kind of a confusion. All at once, he recalled his thoughts about the world and the rat trap. He realized that now it is his own turn had come. So he had allowed himself to be fooled by simply nothing but food, and he had been caught. The whole forest, with its trunks and branches, its thickets and fallen logs, right? Fallen logs means that the some of the trees which had fallen closed in upon him like an impenetrable prison from which he could never escape. So he thought that he was going to stay in that jungle, right? Because of the kind of means ambiguity, or called as the kind of confusion or dilemma he realized in the woods, right? As far as if you see, the wood is also thickets. Thickets means a dense group of bushes, and it became impenetrable, or called as a means impassable for the rat trap seller. So it was late in December, and darkness was already arrived over the forest. Now, December means what? It's a winter season, and this increased in danger and increased also his appearance and gloom. He looked like a despair or sad. Finally, he saw no way out, and he sank down on the ground, tired to death. So he felt like what means uh, he repented. You can say he realized, thinking that his last moment had come. But just as he laid his head on the ground, he heard a sound. What was the sound? A hard, regular thumping. A hard, regular thumping means somebody was means hitting the iron, right? There was no doubt as to what that was. So he did not confirm that what kind of a sound it was. He raised himself. So he protested. He struggled. There are the hammer stroke from an iron mill. So he realized that it was nothing but the stroke came out from the iron mill. He thought there must be people nearby. He summoned all his strength, or you summoned means called as a gathered all his strength, got up and staggered in the direction of the sound. Right. So as far as you know that the word like gloom, which means called as a, you are in the jungle, the what kind of a means appearance inside the jungle will be the darkness, that's called as a gloom. And when you were alone and you could not find out the way to out from the wood, will be considered as a despair, hopelessness, right? So in that case, when he heard the kind of a sound, hammer sound coming out from the um outside into the jungle, so he thought that means this would be the hammer of iron, right? So the and that sound was coming out from where? You can say that Ramsjo ironworks, Ramsjo ironworks, which are now closed down. And you would also find out that they were not so long ago a large plant with a smelter. So if you talk about that ironworks, Ramsjo ironworks, which were not so long ago, but it was a large plant with a smelter. Rolling smelter means you understand that to make steel or iron, rolling mill, and also forge. In the summertime, and during the summertime, long lines of heavily loaded barges and scots. Barge means what? That's something called as a long, flat bottom boat for carrying of freight on canals and rivers. So that is what the meaning of barge, a long, flat bottom boat, right? And if you talk about the author who stated that a large plant with smelter, rolling mill, and forge. Forge means that called a shop where metal is heated, right? So it is also stated that scourge slid down. Scourge means called as means a flat bottom boat used for transforming cargo to and from ship in harbor, right? Scourge slid down the canal. It is also stated which led to a large inland lake, and in the winter time, the roads near the mill were black from all the coal dust which sifted down from the big charcoal crates. So it's a simple like if you find out the mill nearby the was a certain place, so it exhausts what that called as a poisonous fume. So that's what the author stated. The Ramsjo Ironworks was a large plant and that had shut down a long ago, a few years ago. So the author wanted to say that it had a smelter, it had a rolling mill, it had and a forge, right? In summer, long flat bottom boats carrying the material would come down the canal, which led to a large inland lake for supplying material to the mill, and in winters, the roads turned black because of the coal dust that came along due to transportation of the charcoal crates. Right. The author also stated during one of the long dark evenings just before Christmas, the master smith and his helper sat in the dark forge, right? In the near, you can say in the dark forge near the furnace. Why? Now waiting for the crude iron, right? Which had been put in the fire to be ready to put on the anvil. Every now and then, one of them got up to stir the glowing mass with a long iron bar, returning in a few moments, right, dripping with a perspiration, though as was the custom, he wore nothing but a long shirt and a pair of wooden shoes. Now, who? Now we were talking about the master smith, right? So here you will find out that the perspiration, sweating came out, right? So dripping with sweating. So it also find out that the kind of a hard work he did, and also he wore a kind of a long shirt and a pair of wooden shoes, right? So the author wanted to point out that on one long dark evening, not even near Christmas time, the master smith and his helper were sitting in the dark forge, which was built near the furnace, right? So he was wearing a long shirt and a pair of wooden shoes. Both of them were waiting for the pig iron, right, which was put inside the furnace fire to be ready to put onto the anvil. Anvil means called as a begin with, right, or a heavy iron block with a flat top and concave sides. So if you see that fire to be ready to put onto the anvil, so it is nothing but a heavy block with a flat top which is used to shape the metals. They took turns to, they took means what we were talking about, Amit, so no, the master smith and his helper, right? So they took turn to move the liquid, which was very hot, right? As they could bear the heat for a few minutes, each of them would return, sweating continuously or profusely. So all the time there were nothing but many sounds to be heard in the forge. So as it is nothing but a meal, so obviously the sound comes. The big bellows, right, groaned and the burning coal cracked. The big bellows groaned and the burning coal cracked. The fire boy shoveled charcoal into the maw of the furnace. With a great deal of clatter, outside roared the waterfall, and a sharp north wind whipped the rain against the brick tiled roof. The author stated that all the time there were many sounds to be heard in the forge, right? So forge means you understand that something called as a big, a particular place near the furnace. The big bellows groaned. Bellows means called as the big air bag that exhausts nothing but the air or steam of air, right? Used for blowing air into a fire, right? Groaned and the burning coals cracked. So it was simply stating about the things present in the forge. The fire boy shoveled charcoal into the maw of the furnace or jaw. Maw means called as the jaw of the furnace, means the furnace which have a particular place where the means you would find out charcoals are kept or forcefully put with a great deal of clatter. It also produces noise because of that process. Outside shouted with the waterfall and a sharp north and whipped the rain against the brick tiled roof. Right. So that is what the author stated, that how he heard the different types of sounds in the forge and how did he realize that it was nothing but a kind of a sound of big bellow which was blowing air in the fire with a great sound. There was a sound of cracking coal. One could also hear the bang of the charcoal which was being shoveled by the fireboy or pushed by the fireboy. The sounds were coming from outside the mill, and these were of the waterfall, the high speed north wind, which hit the raindrops against the brick tiled roof. It was probably nothing but what, on account of all this noise, that the blacksmith did not notice that a man had opened the gate and entered the forge, right? Until he stood close up to the furnace. So, who was that man, right? So, surely it was nothing unusual for poor vagabonds and any better shelter for the night, right? Without any better shelter for the night. It means because the vagabond means a rat trap or a cellar, right? For him, it was a better shelter for the night to be attracted to the forge by the glow of light, right? Which escaped through the sooty panes, right? Sooty panes is called as a window panes covered in soot. Soot means called as a black powder when coal, wood, etc. is burned. So that place is nothing but completely covered with means black color. So he found out that what um, the first by the glow of light which escaped through the sooty panes, right, and to come in to warm themselves in front of the fire. The blacksmith looked only casual means carelessly and indifferently at the intruder. The meaning of intruder is called as somebody who was you know, without any permission, entered the someone's property, right? Can be called as a trespassers or a stranger. He looked the way people of his type usually did, with a long beard, dirty, ragged, and with a bunch of rat traps, means dangling on his chest. Dangling means that called as uh, putting on his chest. So now after that he asked permission to stay, and the master blacksmith nodded a haughty means you can say that haughty consent without honoring him with a single word. Right? Who asked permission? So the rat trap seller. And what did the master blacksmith did? What did the master blacksmith do? The master blacksmith nodded with a haughty, arrogant consent without respecting him with a single word. So when the peddler tried to seek permission from the blacksmith so that he could stay in the farm for a night, and the person allowed with an arrogant consent by just uh, putting the head down and did not say a single word to him. So the tramp did not say anything. He had not come there to talk, but only to warm himself and to get sleep. In those days, the Ramsjo iron mill was owned by a prominent iron master whose greatest ambition was to ship out good iron to the market. He watched both night and day to see that the work was done as well as possible. And at this very moment, he came into the forge on one of its nightly rounds of inspection. So when you talk about inspection, it's called as kind of a observation, right? So you would find out that naturally the first thing means who he saw was the tall ragamuffin. Ragamuffin means what? The person who was in rags, who had eased his way, comfortable his way to close to the furnace that steam rose from his wet rags. Steam means that called as a warm air, right? So that came out from his wet rags. The iron master did not follow the example of the blacksmith, right? Who had hardly, deigned. Deigned means called as a do something that one considered beneath one's dignity, right? So the man was who? Blacksmith, who had hardly means down his dignity to look at the stranger. He walked close up to him, looked him over very carefully, and then tore off his slouch hat. Means slouch hat means called as a hat bent on one side of the head, right? That to get a better view of his face, right? So now, what did it actually try to say? It's not like the blacksmith. The iron master at once noticed the peddler who was sitting so close to the furnace, and he, when the iron master also found that how the steam was coming out of his turncloths. So he not only went near him, but also removed the wanderer's hat, wanted to see the man's face that was bent to one side so that he could see the man's face clearly. And he saw that also. So, but of course, it is you, Nils Olof, right? Who said, means the Iron Master. How you do look? The man with the rat traps had never before seen the Iron Master at Ramsjo and did not even know what his name was. But it occurred to him that if the fine gentleman thought he was an old acquaintance means somebody means who was not the actual person, but the other person is uh, assuming, right, or believing that he was the same kind of a friend. He might perhaps throw him up a couple of corner. Therefore, he did not want to undeceive him all at once. So, undeceive means called as to tell someone that his belief is mistaken. So, that's what you would find out when the Iron Master took up the peddler's hat, right? So the iron master mistook him. So, and mistook him and thought that what he was none other than, you can say, Nils Olof. The peddler did not know him, nor had he seen this man before. But as the man was thinking, the peddler or rat trap seller was the Nils Olof, so that's it. But he thought that if this man mistook him, so let him mistook, right? So, and that's why I gave him some money out of pity, then it would be a good thing. Therefore, he did not allow him know that he had mistaken him as Nils Olof. So after that, it is stated, yes, God knows things have gone downhill with me. He said, you should not have resigned from the regiment. The iron master said, that was the mistake. If only I had still been in the service at the time, it never would have happened. Well, now, of course, you will come home with me, right? So you would find out the peddler started a conversation with the iron master by saying that things did not go well with him, right? So to this, the iron master replied that he had made a big mistake by leaving the regiment. Regiment means what? There's something called as a place, or called as a place for army people. He also added that if he would have been working in the regiment, right, when he resigned, he would not have let him do so. Later on, he invited him to his home. Now, you would find out the kind of a conversation introduced the profession of the iron master, that the iron master was earlier worked in an army, and how did he resign from his service, right? So to go along up to the manor house and be received by the owner like an old regimental comrade, that however did not please the tramp. No, I could not think of it, he said, looking quite alarmed. He thought of the 30 kroner to go up to the manor house would be like throwing himself voluntarily into the lion's den. He only wanted a chance to sleep here in the farm forge and then sneak away as conspicuously as possibly. So here it is stated about sneak away. So sneak away means secretly or inconspicuously. It means called as without any notice. So he's supposed to leave that. He's supposed to leave that place on his own suitable time. So the rat trap seller did not find it to be a good idea. Why or where not to visit the iron master's place? He was afraid actually with the idea of visiting to the large house of an old soldier, which according to him was not safe. After all, he had stolen the money with him. He did not want to put himself in danger. That's why he called that going to that place is nothing but a lion's den. His intention were to what? Now sleep. Sleep in the farm and then go away secretly from that place. So even when anyone's notice. So the iron master assumed that the man, the intruder, felt embarrassed. Embarrassed means not feeling comfortable because of its means kind of a dress he wore, miserable clothing. So means the iron master was thinking something different, but the peddler was thinking something different. Please don't think that I have such a fine home that you cannot show yourself there, he said. Elizabeth is dead, as you may already have heard. My boys are abroad, and there is no one at home except my oldest daughter and myself. We were just saying that it was too bad we did not have any company for Christmas. Now come with me and help us make the Christmas food disappear a little faster. Now, the Iron Master was aware of his friends actually. Friends, what? Friends' miserable condition. So, means, so he tried to make him comfortable by saying that he should feel free to come his home, as his home was nothing but an ordinary one. And he told that his wife was no more and added that he must be aware of this. Then he allowed him know that both his sons were settled where? Abroad. So, who are there in the Iron Master's house? That's called as his wife was no more. His sons were settled abroad. Only he and his daughter were left at home. He invited him to celebrate Christmas with his family so that he and his daughter may have some, company at the Christmas feast, right? So, but the stranger said no, and no, and no. And the Iron Master saw that he must give in, right? So, and why did the stranger say no, no, no? Because he knew that he stole the money. So, it looks as though Captain Von Sal preferred to stay with you tonight. Sunstorm, he said to the master blacksmith and turned on his heels. So, what do you find out here? Though the Iron Master made many attempts to invite the, what do you say that, the rat trap seller, the peddler or the rat trap seller did not accept the man's invitation. At last, he says to the blacksmith, Storm, that it seemed that Captain Von Stahl, who was a peddler, wanted to stay with him in the forge. Right? So, but he laughed to himself as if he went away, and the blacksmith, who knew him, understood very well that he had not said his last word. So, he was trying to hiding something. It was not more than half an hour before they heard the sound of carriage wheels outside the means of forge, and a new guest came in. But this time it was not the Iron Master. Now who was that? Now he had sent his daughter, clearly hoping that she would have better powers of persuasion than he himself. As the Iron Master did not convince the intruder, or called as a peddler or the rat trap seller, to come to the house, so he sent his daughter to means persuade. Persuade means request, right, or convince that he did not do it, so the daughter could do it, right? And it all happened after a gap of half an hour, right? So she entered. Who entered? Means the girl, followed by a valet. Valet means called as with a personal attendant on his arm, a big fur coat. She was carrying on his arm a big fur coat, right? She was not at all pretty, right? But seemed modest. That's something called as a humble and quite shy. In the forge, everything was just as it had been earlier in the evening. The master blacksmith and his apprentice means what? Blacksmith and his learner, right? Still sat on the bench, and iron and charcoal still means shining in the furnace. The stranger had stretched himself out on the floor and put with a piece of pig iron under his head, and his hat pulled down over his eyes. As soon as the young girl caught sight of him, she went up and lifted his hat. Right. The stranger had, you understand that it is stated the iron and charcoal still glowed in the furnace. The stranger had stretched himself out on the floor and lay with a piece of pig iron under his head, and his hat pulled down over his eyes. So as soon as the young girl caught sight of him, she went up and lifted his hat. The man was witnessed used to sleeping with one eye open. He jumped up abruptly and seemed to be quite frightened. Right. So it is something like a very strange. Right. When the Iron Master's daughter entered the mill with her attendant, who was carrying a big fur coat. Right. She was a humble girl who was very shy, right? When she entered, everyone was busy the same way as they had been earlier. The blacksmith was still sitting on the bench with his trainees and was working on the iron. She went up to the peddler and lifted his hat. Who? The girl. The peddler slept with one eye open, and as soon as he saw her, he got shocked and jumped up. Who? Means uh, the peddler, or you talk about the the rat trap seller, right? So we will keep till this. We will continue from my name is Edla Wellmanson, right? So in the next class means tomorrow, right? Are you listening to me?
Tomorrow at what time?
Tomorrow evening will be okay with you? 9 to 10?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we will resume from the part where we left. We will complete it, right? Bye. What do you mean? Bye, Aditi. Good night.
Sir, actually, I have some few doubts, sir.
Ask her. Ask
I
her.
need to understand some things.
Yeah, tell me.
What is the meaning of tickets?
Tell me the sentence where it is written. Tell me.
The whole forest with its trunks and branches, its thickets and fallen logs closed in upon him as an impenetrable prison from which he could never escape.
Okay, thickets. 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 Thickets is called as a dense group of bushes. A dense group. Dense, you understand? That's something called as a huge, means huge, a particular part which is covered with the huge trees, big trees, and bushes, small grasses. They all are there present. So, which can be called as a thickets. It is stated, no, the whole forest with its trunks. Trunks means called as a the trees, trunks, and branches. Its thickets. Thickets means called as a dense or big size, and fallen logs. Fallen logs means log of the tree. The log is also known as a wood that closed in upon him like an impenetrable prison. So which were putting in such a way that it block the person not to allow to go further. Right. That is what called as a thickets means. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Anything else?
There were thumping.
Thumping. Thumping. What is
Yes, sir.
so thumping is called as a hard regular thumping. So something which is hit in so hard, it makes a kind of a sound. A hard regular thumping. Thump means called as a hitting something, right? That make a big sound. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Anything else?
Ragamuffin.
What? Spell the word.
Ragamuffin.
Oh, ragamuffin. So, means ragamuffin is called as a person in a rags. RAGS. Rags means called as the kind of a dress you own. That's called as a um, very shabby in condition, a piece of old cloth that he wore. So that is what called as a ragamuffin. So ragamuffin is referring to a person who was wearing a very old shabby cloth, right? Especially the cloth which was torn from a larger place or piece. Okay.
Yes. Mm.
It is stated naturally the first thing he saw was the tall ragamuffin. The tall ragamuffin who had eased his way too close to the furnace. The person who was wearing a shabby clothes.